welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at MDA Space Ltd.
MDA Space Ltd.
You've sent us a ton of information about this company.
Yeah.
A Canadian space company.
Yeah.
And we're going to be trying to sift through all this stuff and give you, the listener, the key takeaways.
Absolutely.
The things that you might not see.
The nuggets.
Yeah, the nuggets,
This?
the golden nuggets and all this material.
Yeah.
So to start off, I guess, what does MDA Space do?
So MDA Space, they've been around for about 50 years. They've got their hands in a lot of different areas in the space industry, but they operate under three main kind of business areas: geointelligence, robotics and space operations, and satellite systems. So they make satellites, they make the robotic arms, and they provide data and services for governments and other commercial customers.
Okay.
All related to space.
So let's dig into each of those a little bit. So geointelligence. That sounds like a very interesting word. What does that mean?
Yeah, so it sounds a bit like spying from space, and it's kind of like that.
Okay.
But it's using satellites and data and imagery from space to understand what's happening on Earth. So things like climate change, national security, disaster relief.
Okay.
They use the data from their satellites and provide that as a service. And one of the really cool things that MDA does is they've developed radar satellites that can see through clouds.
Oh, wow.
So they're not limited by weather patterns or nighttime.
So 24/7, they can see what's happening.
Exactly, yeah. So
really cool.
It opens up a lot of possibilities.
Yeah. Okay, so that's geointelligence.
Yeah.
What about robotics and space operations?
Yeah.
I mean, everyone's probably heard of the Canadarm.
The Canadarm.
Which MDA built.
Exactly.
So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the Canadarm is kind of one of their flagship achievements.
Yeah.
And, it was used on the space shuttle to move things around, to grapple things. And they're working on the successor to the Canadarm.
Wow.
Which is Canadarm3, which is going to be used on the Lunar Gateway, which is this new space station that's being built that's going to orbit the moon.
Okay.
As a staging ground for lunar operations.
Wow. So they're not just building robots for Earth, they're building robots for space.
Robots for space, exactly.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Okay, and then satellite systems. What kind of satellites are they building?
So they build communication satellites, they build Earth observation satellites, and one of the kind of neat things about their platform is they've got a satellite platform called Aurora, and it's designed to be modular and flexible, so it can be customized to the customer's needs.
So it's like a build-your-own satellite kit.
Kind of, yeah.
Okay, so it's
We
very
can kind of tailor it.
Versatile.
Yeah, to whatever the customer needs. So that's a really interesting part of their business as well.
Okay, so that's kind of like the three main things that MDA does. And the space industry right now, everyone's saying there's so much potential.
Huge potential, yeah.
How big is this industry expected to be?
Well, it's projections are saying trillions of dollars in the coming decades.
Trillions.
Trillions, yeah. So we're talking significant growth.
Okay, and what's causing that? What are the trends?
So there's a lot of things happening, right? We've got falling launch costs, advancements in technology, and then the demand for satellite-based services is increasing dramatically.
Okay.
So those are kind of the three main things. But, you've got a lot of players now.
Yeah.
It's not just government agencies anymore. You've got private companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin.
Right.
And it's really changing the landscape.
So it's not just governments going into space anymore.
No, exactly.
That's private companies that are really...
Private companies are really pushing the boundaries.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the management team at MDA. Who's leading this ship?
So the CEO is Mike Greenlee. He's been CEO since 2017, and he's been in the aerospace industry for a long time. And he's got a really good track record.
Okay.
He's focused on execution, and he's delivered value for shareholders.
Okay, so he's kind of a straight shooter. He's going to get things done.
Yeah, he's known as a get-it-done kind of guy.
Okay, great. What about the rest of the management team?
So the management team is very experienced as well, and they've been doing a really good job with their growth strategy.
Okay.
And one of the things that they've been doing is making strategic acquisitions.
Okay.
So they're buying companies.
Mergers and acquisitions.
Mergers and acquisitions, yep.
And what kind of companies are they targeting with these acquisitions?
So they're looking to strengthen their supply chain, expand their technological capabilities, and also get a bigger footprint in markets like the U.S. and Europe.
Okay.
So that's been a key part of their growth strategy.
So they're not just trying to grow organically, they're trying to grow through acquisition as well?
Exactly.
Okay, cool. So let's talk a little bit about the financials of MDA. So they're a publicly traded company.
Yep.
So what's their financial health look like?
So their market cap is about 2.8 billion Canadian dollars.
Okay.
And their PE ratio is a little bit on the high side, but that's reflective of the fact that
The industry's growing.
the industry's growing and they're a growth company.
Okay. Yeah. So what about their revenue and earnings? Are they actually making money?
They are, yeah. So their revenue has been growing steadily over the past few years, and they've generated close to $1 billion in revenue in the last 12 months. And they're also profitable.
Okay.
Their adjusted EBITDA is about $188 million in the last 12 months.
Okay, so that's really good.
Yeah. So they're not just generating revenue, they're actually making a profit.
Yeah.
Which is really important.
Okay.
And they also have a strong balance sheet. Their debt-to-equity ratio is pretty low.
Okay.
So that gives them some flexibility.
They're not over-leveraged.
No, they're not over-leveraged.
So they have a little bit of room to move.
Maneuver, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so now let's talk about market sentiment.
Okay.
Like, how are investors and analysts viewing MDA Space?
Okay.
So tell me about market sentiment.
All right.
What's the vibe?
What's the vibe? Yeah, the vibe is pretty good. They're included in the S&P TSX Composite Index,
Okay.
which is a good sign, and the stock has been performing well.
Okay, so it seems like investors are kind of liking what they're seeing.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some optimism
Okay.
about the future of the company.
But, the space industry is also very volatile.
Oh, yeah,
Like, stock prices can go up and down pretty quickly.
for sure.
So, like, what are some things that could impact the sentiment around MDA?
Well, I think any news or developments in the space industry as a whole can have an impact on MDA. So, for example, there was a report a while back about Apple potentially partnering with Starlink for their satellite connectivity.
Yeah.
And MDA's stock actually dipped a little bit after that news came out.
Oh, wow.
So, it just shows that there's a lot of competition in this industry, and investors are always looking for, who's going to be the winner.
Right. So how is MDA trying to attract investors and kind of differentiate themselves?
Well, one of the things they've announced is they're pursuing a dual listing in the U.S.
Okay.
So that would give them access to a much larger pool of investors and potentially increase their valuation.
Okay.
And that's something that a lot of Canadian tech companies have done.
Yeah.
And it's been pretty successful.
Yeah, so it could be a good move for them.
Yeah, I think it could be a good move.
Okay. What are the analysts saying?
So the analysts are generally pretty positive on MDA. The average 12-month price target is significantly higher than the current share price. Wow.
Okay.
So that suggests that they think the company is undervalued.
Okay. Oh, good.
And they have room to grow.
All right, so let's talk about the ownership structure of the company. Who are the major shareholders?
So it's a pretty diverse ownership structure. You've got a mix of institutional investors, individual investors, and some company insiders.
Okay.
Which is generally a good thing. You don't want one entity to have too much control.
Right, it's kind of like checks and balances.
Exactly.
So who's the biggest shareholder?
The largest shareholder is John Carter Risley. He's a Canadian entrepreneur, and he's also the chairman of the board.
Okay.
And he owns a little over 2% of the company's shares.
Okay, so he's a significant shareholder, but he doesn't have like a controlling stake.
No, not a controlling stake.
Okay, all right, let's talk about risks.
Okay.
Every investment has risks.
Of course, yeah.
And the space industry is no exception.
Definitely not.
So what are some of the risks that investors should be aware of when they're looking at MDA?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest risks is competition. The space industry is getting increasingly crowded.
Right.
You've got the traditional aerospace giants like Boeing and Lockheed Martin, but you've also got these new upstarts like SpaceX and Blue Origin.
It's a whole new space race.
Exactly. It's a whole new space race.
Right.
So MDA has to find a way to differentiate themselves and compete.
Right. So how are they doing that?
Well, they're focusing on some niche markets like radar satellites,
Okay.
where they have a technological advantage.
Okay.
And they're also investing heavily in R&D to try to stay ahead of the curve.
So they're not just trying to compete on price, they're trying to compete on innovation.
Yeah, exactly. They're trying to be the leaders in certain areas.
Okay. What other risks should investors be thinking about?
I think another risk is dependence on government contracts.
Okay.
So a big chunk of MDA's revenue comes from contracts with government agencies like NASA.
Right.
And the Canadian Space Agency. And while that can provide some stability, it also makes them vulnerable to funding cuts or changes in government priorities.
It's putting a lot of eggs in one basket.
Yeah, exactly. So they're trying to diversify their revenue streams and get more commercial contracts, but it's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, okay. All right, let's move on to the SWOT analysis. So strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats.
Okay.
So starting with strengths, what are some of MDA's key advantages?
Well, they have a long track record in the space industry. They've been around for over 55 years.
Right.
They have a reputation for delivering high-quality products and services.
Yeah.
They also have a strong team of engineers and scientists.
So they've got the expertise.
They've got the expertise.
Okay, what about weaknesses? Where could they improve?
I think one area where they could improve is talent acquisition and retention.
Okay.
The space industry is booming right now.
Yeah.
There's a lot of competition for talent.
Yeah.
Companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin are offering big salaries and perks.
Right.
So it's tough for MDA to compete.
So it's a war for talent.
It's a war for talent, yeah.
Okay, so how are they addressing that?
Well, they're trying to enhance their employer brand.
Okay.
They're highlighting the cool projects that they work on.
Yeah.
Like Canadarm3 and the radar satellites. And they're also trying to create a more positive work environment.
Right. So they're trying to be a place where people want to work.
Exactly.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Right, opportunities. What are some of the exciting possibilities for MDA?
I mean, the biggest opportunity is the growth of the space economy.
Yeah.
Right? It's a multi-trillion-dollar market.
Yeah.
As space becomes more accessible and affordable, MDA is well-positioned to benefit from that.
Right.
They're also looking at some emerging trends like space tourism, in-space manufacturing, and even asteroid mining.
Asteroid mining.
Yeah, it sounds crazy.
It does sound crazy.
But it's a real thing.
Wow.
And it could be a huge opportunity in the future.
So they're thinking long-term.
They're thinking long-term, yeah.
Okay. All right. Threats. What are some of the things that could derail MDA's success?
Well, one threat is technological disruption.
Okay.
The space industry is constantly evolving. New technologies are emerging all the time, so MDA has to stay ahead of the curve.
So invest in R&D.
Invest in R&D, make sure their technology is up to date.
Right.
Another threat is regulatory uncertainty. The space industry is still relatively young.
Yeah.
The rules and regulations are still being developed, so changes in those regulations could impact MDA's business.
That's like the Wild West out there.
Kind of, yeah.
All right, and then finally, what about space debris?
Yeah, space debris is a growing concern.
Okay, great. So we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about MDA's business, their financials, market sentiment, the broader trends in the space industry.
Yeah.
What's your overall assessment of MDA's position in this industry?
I think MDA is a company with a lot of potential.
Yep.
They have a strong track record. They have a lot of expertise. They're well-positioned in some key growth markets, but they also face some significant challenges.
Why?
The competition is intense. The regulatory environment is uncertain.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see how they navigate these challenges in the years to come.
Right. So they've got a lot going for them, but there are also some risks that investors need to be aware of.
Exactly.
It's really interesting that a company that's been around for, over half a century is now kind of at the forefront of this new space economy.
It is, yeah. It's like they've got all this legacy, all this heritage, and now they're applying it to this brand new industry that's emerging.
Yeah, it's like they've been training for this moment for like 50 years.
Yeah, exactly. And they're not just like, sitting back and watching it happen. They're actually making moves to be a leader in this new space economy.
Like with the dual listing and stuff like that.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive.
It is.
What do you think is like the most exciting part of their business? Like, what are you personally most interested in?
I'm really fascinated by the radar satellites.
Yeah.
I think that technology has the potential to be really transformative.
Yeah, because like you said, they can see through clouds 24/7.
Exactly.
So it's like they're providing this constant stream of data regardless of the weather.
And that's so important for things like, disaster response.
Right.
Environmental monitoring.
Climate change.
Yeah, climate change. All these things that are really critical.
Yeah, and then there's the Canadarm3 for the Lunar Gateway.
Yeah.
That's a pretty big deal too, right?
It is, yeah. I mean, that's a major project.
Yeah.
And it's a key part of NASA's Artemis program, which is, aiming to establish a sustainable presence on the moon.
Wow. So they're not just like involved in space.
Right.
They're like helping to build the future of humanity in space.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's pretty inspiring.
Yeah, it is. It's really cool. So like all this stuff sounds amazing.
Yeah.
But I'm sure there are challenges too.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like, what do you think is the biggest hurdle that MDA is going to have to overcome?
I think one of the biggest challenges is going to be the geopolitical landscape
Okay.
of space. You
Yeah.
know, as more and more countries and companies get involved in space.
It's going to get crowded up there.
It is, yeah. And there's the potential for conflict
Yeah.
and competition. You know, we're already seeing some tensions around things like space debris,
Right.
satellite interference, you know, even the militarization of space.
Like the new Wild West up there.
Yeah, it kind of is.
So how can MDA navigate that? Like, how can they make sure that they're being responsible?
Well, I think they need to be proactive
Okay.
about things like space debris mitigation, responsible satellite operation,
Right.
and they also need to be engaged in international dialogue
Okay.
and cooperation.
So working with other countries
Working with other countries, yeah.
to establish some rules.
Exactly. Yeah, because the rules are still being written.
Yeah. That's scary and exciting at the same time.
It is, yeah.
So I think we've covered pretty much everything here.
I think so.
You know, we've talked about MDA's business, their financials, market sentiment, the risks, the opportunities.
Yeah,
It's been a pretty comprehensive deep dive.
it has.
But now I want to hear from you, the listener.
Yeah.
What do you think about MDA Space? Do you think they have what it takes to succeed in this new space economy?
You know, it's a tough question.
Yeah.
There's a lot of factors to consider.
Yeah.
But we've given you the information
Hopefully.
to make an informed decision.
Yeah, we've given you the tools
So it's up to you.
to do your own research.
Exactly. Yeah, do your own research.
to decide if this is a company that you're interested in.
Yeah, if you're bullish on space,
Yeah.
this could be one to watch.
Yeah, for sure.
So let us know what you think.
Yeah, head over to the comment section.
Yeah?
Let us know your thoughts on MDA Space.
And if you have any other companies
Yeah.
that you'd like us to do a deep dive on,
Let us know.
leave a comment.
Yeah, we're always looking for new ideas.
Always looking for new ideas.
So thanks for joining us on this deep dive into MDA Space Ltd. It's been a fascinating journey.
It has
The final frontier.
the final frontier.
Until next time, keep looking up.
Keep looking up.
And remember, the information presented in this podcast is for educational purposes only and should not be considered financial advice. Investing involves risk, and past performance is not indicative of future results. Please conduct thorough research and consult with a qualified financial advisor before making any investment decisions. Artificial intelligence was used in the preparation of this content.